The signal arrived one cold evening in the year 2043. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible, like a whisper from the depths of space. Scientists in a remote observatory picked it up, but thought nothing of it at first, chalking it up to space noise, something ordinary that would pass without notice. But as hours turned into days, the signal grew stronger, and its pattern became undeniable. It wasn't just noise. It was a message. Someone or something was out there trying to communicate with Earth. Dr. Liana Ray was the lead researcher at the observatory, and she was the first to notice the change in the signal. Unlike others who had dismissed it as a glitch, she saw something more in the way the data shifted and hummed. It wasn't random. And it wasn't just a wave of static. There was structure hidden beneath it. She stayed up for nights running tests and checking frequencies, hoping it was nothing but a mistake. But every test came back the same. The signal was real. The world's top scientists were called to examine the strange transmission. Their first reaction was skepticism. Many believed it was simply an anomaly of some sort. But as weeks passed and more evidence emerged, a strange truth started to form. This was not some isolated event. This was deliberate. Whoever or whatever was sending this signal wanted Earth to hear it. The message took the form of a series of repeating numbers. At first, they seemed incomprehensible, but to Dr. Ray, they were more than just random digits. They had a rhythm to them, like a language of sorts, a code to be cracked. Every new sequence was another clue. Each one unlocked more of the puzzle. The numbers themselves became the subject of debate among the world's greatest minds, but they all agreed on one thing: the signal was not from Earth. And it was not a natural occurrence. Something or someone had sent it intentionally. One evening, after weeks of analysis, Dr. Ray sat in her office staring at the screen before her. The numbers were starting to make sense. The patterns aligned in a way that suggested intelligence behind them, as if the message was tailored specifically for Earth. And then there it was, the breakthrough she had been waiting for. Buried in the complex code was a clear message, one that sent a chill down her spine. The signal read. It was a simple yet profound statement: Earth was being watched, and the time had come for those watching to make contact. It wasn't a threat or a warning, but an invitation, a call to Earth to prepare itself for something far greater than anyone had anticipated. The discovery was a sensation worldwide. News stations picked up on it immediately. While some reacted with fear, others saw it as the greatest breakthrough in human history. No longer were humans alone in the universe. The idea that Earth might not be the only planet with intelligent life was now undeniable. But with this realization came a lingering question: what did this mysterious signal mean for Earth? And who was sending it? What did they want? And were humanity's defenses truly ready for whatever was about to unfold? As the signal pulsed on, growing stronger with every passing moment, the world stood at the edge of a new era, unaware of the incredible journey that lay ahead and the fate that was now tied to a simple signal from the stars. Dr. Ray sat at her desk, her eyes fixed on the monitor. As the signal continued to pulse in rhythmic patterns, she had spent countless hours over the last few weeks studying the data, and yet it felt like she was only scratching the surface. Despite the initial excitement that the signal was some kind of breakthrough, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. There was a deeper layer beneath the numbers, a meaning hidden within the code that she was struggling to uncover. The rest of the team had been pushing for her to share the findings with the world, but she knew they weren't ready. Not yet. She needed to be certain that what she had discovered was truly what she thought it was. What if the message was misinterpreted? Or worse, what if they were being led down a dangerous path? The weight of that possibility was heavy on her shoulders, but the pressure to act was mounting every day. New reports came in from other observatories around the world confirming the signal's presence and its increasing strength. Something was happening, and she couldn't afford to ignore it. The breakthrough came when Dr. Ray discovered that the signal was not just a random sequence of numbers. After all, it was a complex algorithm. Hidden within the structure were subtle patterns that mimicked the workings of human language. Certain groups of numbers repeated in specific intervals, resembling the structure of a sentence. It was a form of communication, not just noise. And the deeper she dug, the clearer it became that this message was not for the entire planet. It was for her alone. The way the numbers aligned with her previous research made it seem as though the signal had been tailored to her expertise. It was almost as if they had been waiting for her to find them. After days of sleepless nights working with a small team of trusted colleagues, Dr. Ray finally cracked the code. With trembling hands, she typed in the final sequence on her keyboard, and the message appeared in plain text. The translation was shocking. It read, "We are watching you, Earth. You are not alone. And soon you will be tested. Prepare yourselves for the next phase." Dr. Ray's heart raced as she stared at the screen, her mind racing with possibilities. What did this mean? Who were they? What did they want? And why now? There were more questions than answers. But one thing was clear: Earth was no longer just a planet floating in isolation in the vastness of space. It was being observed, and something far greater than anything humanity had ever known was on the horizon. She quickly shared the findings with her team. But as the message spread through the scientific community, there was an unexpected divide. Some were eager to make contact, some wanted to prepare for a possible threat, while others advised caution. Their skepticism grew as they debated the meaning of the message. Could it be a hoax, a clever manipulation? Or was this truly the beginning of a new chapter in human history? As the signal continued to intensify, there was no longer any doubt this was not some random event. Earth had been chosen, but chosen for what? The world waited in suspense, the clock ticking down as Dr. Ray and her team scrambled to uncover more of the message. Time was running out, but there was still so much they didn't understand, and the questions only multiplied as the signal grew louder. The signal kept growing louder, its pulses now reverberating in the minds of those who had once dismissed it as a mere curiosity. Earth was no longer just observing the stars, it was now the center of attention from something far beyond human comprehension. As the days passed, more of the message was revealed, each new segment carrying with it a deeper sense of unease and wonder. The encoded words were precise but cryptic. They spoke of protectors of ancient civilizations, of warriors who had fought in wars stretching across the galaxy. But there were no names, no details, just vague allusions to powerful beings with knowledge and abilities that Earth could scarcely imagine. Dr. Ray and her team had been working tirelessly to decode more of the message, but with each breakthrough came even more questions. Who were these beings? Why had they chosen to contact Earth? And what did the warning about being tested mean? All her years of research had prepared her for deep space phenomena, but nothing like this. She found herself questioning everything she knew about the universe. The possibilities were endless and terrifying. As the message continued to unfold, one thing became clear to Dr. Ray. The signal was not just a warning. It was an invitation. The protectors of the galaxy had noticed Earth, and they had deemed it worthy of their attention. But that attention came with a price. Soon they would be here, soon they would arrive, and Earth would be tested. It was then that the first of them appeared, a flash of light in the sky so bright it seemed to swallow the stars around it. It landed in the barren desert of Nevada, far from prying eyes. But even so, the news spread like wildfire. Within minutes, military satellites and ground forces were on alert. Every major news outlet began broadcasting the strange occurrence around the world. It was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. A being from the stars arrived, not in a ship, but in a sudden burst of light, a figure materializing from the energy itself. The being stood tall, towering over the military personnel who had arrived at the crash site. Its body encased in a form-fitting suit that shimmered in the light like molten metal. Its face was concealed behind a mask, but the eyes were visible, glowing with an intensity that seemed to pierce through the veil of time itself. It exuded power and purpose, yet there was a strange calmness to its presence, as if it had seen and experienced things that were beyond human understanding. Dr. Ray was the first to be brought to the site by military officials. They needed answers, and they needed them fast. The world was waiting. The beam remained silent, but there was an unmistakable sense that it was waiting for her. Its presence seemed to call up to her specifically, as if it knew who she was before she even spoke. With great caution, she approached the figure, her mind racing with 1,000 questions. But she knew this moment would define everything. The fate of Earth rested in her hands. As she stood before the mysterious being, she felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility. She wasn't just representing humanity. She was now the first point of contact, the first to learn the truth about the protectors, the warriors who had arrived to test them all. The silence between them stretched on, but then the being spoke. Its voice wasn't like any human voice. It was deep, resonant, like the echo of a distant thunderstorm. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of the universe itself. It said, "We are the Defenders, and we have come to see if you are ready for the challenges ahead." The world held its breath as the being's words hung in the air like a declaration of fate. Desiree stood frozen in front of the Defender, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Every instinct told her to ask questions, to demand answers. But she knew this was not a moment for demands. This was a moment for understanding. The silence between them stretched on longer than she expected, yet the Defender made no move to break it. Instead, it stood there, its presence a constant force in the air, radiating power and purpose. Desiree could feel the eyes of the world on her. The news cameras were trained on the site. The military was on edge, waiting for her to make a decision. Her every word would be scrutinized, every action interpreted as the next step in humanity's first contact with something beyond the stars. At last she took a step forward, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts racing through her mind. She asked, "What do you mean by ready? What do you want from us?" The Defender's eyes seemed to glow brighter, as if considering her words carefully. After a long pause, it finally responded, "We come not to take, but to test your resolve, your strength, your will to survive and evolve. We have watched you for a long time, Earth, and now it is time for you to prove that you are worthy of your place among the stars." Desiree's mind was spinning. She could feel the magnitude of the situation sinking in. This wasn't just an alien race offering knowledge or technology. This was something far greater. It was a challenge, a test of humanity's very essence. The Defender continued speaking, its voice resonating deep within her. "You will face a trial unlike any you have encountered before. Those who succeed will be allowed to join us as protectors of the galaxy. Those who fail will be left behind." She was overwhelmed by the implications of the words, but there was no time to dwell on it. The Defender's attention shifted to the world beyond them, as if sensing the pulse of the human race itself. "You are at a crossroads, Earth. The path you take from here will determine your future," it said, and then it stepped back slowly, almost deliberately, as if inviting humanity to decide its next move. The tension in the air grew palpable as military personnel began to stir their weapons at the ready, but the Defender made no move to threaten them. Instead, it simply waited, its gaze now fixed on the horizon, where the first signs of a new dawn were beginning to break across the sky. Desiree took a deep breath. She knew the weight of what was being asked of her. The world was waiting for a decision, and for the first time in her life, she felt the weight of humanity's future pressing down on her. She wasn't just a scientist anymore. She was the key to Earth's survival, and possibly its greatest challenge. With the Defender still watching her, she turned to the military officials behind her. The decision was not hers alone to make. She had to consult the world leaders. She had to bring them together. There was no room for hesitation, no time for fear. This moment was the start of something far bigger than anything Earth had ever faced, and the next steps would decide everything. The world was in chaos after the Defender's words spread across every news channel and social media platform. The message was clear: Earth was on the brink of something monumental, but no one was certain exactly what that would mean. The meeting of world leaders was called with unprecedented urgency, but even as governments scrambled to respond, there was no unified voice, no common ground to stand on. Some believed the Defender spoke the truth, and that humanity had no choice but to prove itself, while others were deeply suspicious of the motives behind the challenge. Desiree found herself caught in the middle of it all. She had spent years studying the unknown, but never had she felt so out of her depth. Her mind kept returning to the Defender's words, "You will face a trial unlike any you have encountered before." The message weighed heavily on her as she prepared to speak to the world leaders. She knew that the fate of humanity rested on their decisions, but how could she convey the gravity of the situation? How could she make them understand what was at stake? The summit began with leaders from every corner of the globe arriving at the secure location in Geneva. The room was filled with tension as each nation's representatives exchanged wary glances and whispered among themselves. The atmosphere was thick with uncertainty, yet despite their differences, they all shared one thing in common: fear of the unknown, fear of a trial they couldn't possibly understand, fear that Earth was about to be tested in a way it had never been tested before. Desiree was ushered to the center of the room, and as she stepped up to the podium, the eyes of the world were upon her. She opened her mouth, But for a moment nothing came out. The weight of the moment hit her with such force that she nearly stumbled, but then she took a deep breath and began. "We have been given a choice," she said, her voice steady, but carrying the full weight of the message she had to convey. "The defenders are not here to conquer us. They are here to see if we are ready to take our place in the cosmos. If we can pass the trial they have set before us, we can join them in protecting this galaxy. But if we fail, we risk being left behind, lost in the void of space without the chance to evolve." There was a long pause as the room absorbed her words. No one dared speak for a moment. The silence was deafening before a voice broke through the stillness. It was one of the more conservative leaders who had initially been against any sort of contact with the defenders. "How do we know they are telling the truth? How do we know they aren't leading us into our destruction?" Dr. Ray looked him dead in the eye. "We don't know, but what I can tell you is this: Earth is on the brink of something far greater than we could have ever imagined. And this is our moment to decide whether we will be part of it or whether we will fall into obscurity." The debate that followed was fierce. Some argued for immediate acceptance of the defenders' challenge. Others demanded more evidence before taking any action. But the defenders' message could not be ignored. It was too clear. And the more Dare spoke, the more the world leaders began to understand the gravity of the situation. The defenders were watching, waiting to see what Earth would do next. The question remained unanswered: what would Earth do next? But one thing was certain: humanity's future would never be the same. The debate in the room continued for hours as world leaders argued fiercely over how to respond to the defenders' challenge. It seemed like every nation had their own concerns. Some worried about the risks of failure and the potential consequences for the people. Others feared what unknown dangers might be lurking behind the words of the mysterious beings. Dr. Ray listened carefully to each argument, but inside her, she knew that time was running out. The longer they delayed, the more they risked losing the chance to prove themselves. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the room fell silent as the representatives of the major global powers looked to one another. A decision had to be made. No more dithering, no more fear. The world could not afford to waste any more time. After what felt like a long and painful pause, a voice broke through the stillness. It was the President of the United States who spoke first, his voice calm but resolute. "We will take the challenge. We have no choice but to prove ourselves. If we don't, we risk being lost forever." His words resonated deeply with the others, and slowly, one by one, the other leaders nodded in agreement. A murmur of assent rippled through the room. The decision had been made. Earth would face the trial. The world had no choice but to embrace the unknown. Dr. Ray felt a sense of relief wash over her, but it was quickly replaced with the heavy weight of responsibility. She had been a part of this decision, but she knew the true test was yet to come. The trial that the defenders spoke of would come soon enough, and no one could predict what it would entail. They had no idea how humanity would be tested or what dangers they would face. As the summit drew to a close, Darveray returned to her lab, her mind still racing with the possibilities of what lay ahead. The signal continued to pulse relentlessly, a constant reminder of the decision they had just made, and as she sat in front of her monitor, she couldn't help but feel a sense of dread creeping up her spine. The message had spoken of a test, but it had given no details, no clear path forward. They were walking into the unknown, with no guide, no map to follow. For the next few days, the world prepared in silence. The military ramped up their readiness. The scientific community began to theorize on what the trial might entail, and the media speculated on every possibility, from tests of intellect to trials of combat. Each person on Earth had their own interpretation of what was to come, but no one knew the truth. Only the defenders held that knowledge. And then one day it happened. The first phase of the trial began. Without warning, a pulse of energy from the sky struck the Earth with a force that rattled every building in the vicinity. The world watched in awe and terror as the sky seemed to split open for a brief moment. The entire planet was bathed in a blinding light before everything returned to normal. But it was clear the defenders had begun their test. Dr. Ray was once again called to the center of the world's attention as she worked tirelessly alongside military experts and scientists to understand what had just happened. But even with all their collective knowledge, no one could explain the phenomenon. All they knew was that the defenders had started the trial and Earth was now playing its part. The blinding light from the sky faded, but the effects were far from gone in the aftermath of the pulse. A strange stillness hung over the earth, as though the planet itself was holding its breath. The cities were silent, and the usual hum of everyday life had disappeared as people waited to see what would happen next. No one spoke of what they had witnessed in the sky, but everyone felt its presence. The world was on edge, a constant awareness that something was coming, something that could change everything. Dr. Ray stood at the observation post overlooking the desert where the pulse had originated. The military had established a perimeter around the site, but beyond that no one knew what to expect. She had been called in to lead the team of scientists and strategists who were trying to analyze the energy from the pulse and determine what had just happened. She felt the weight of the responsibility as she stood in the hot sun, her thoughts racing with questions that had no answers. What did the pulse mean? Was it a test or a sign that the defenders were beginning the next phase of their challenge? As she reviewed the data from the energy blast, her mind struggled to comprehend what she was seeing. The wave of energy had been unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. It was a frequency that resonated with every known particle in the universe, but there was a strange harmony to it, as though the energy had been intentionally crafted to affect not just Earth, but the very fabric of reality itself. The more she looked, the more she realized that whatever had just happened had not been an accident. The defenders were deliberate in their actions. They were watching and waiting for humanity to respond. But the world was restless. Tensions were rising even as the leaders of Earth tried to maintain control. Protests broke out in major cities across the globe. People were frightened. They didn't understand the nature of the trial. They were unsure if they were being tested or if this was the beginning of an invasion. Some governments tried to downplay the event, but the truth was out there, and the world could feel it. The defenders had arrived, and the time for uncertainty was over. As the days passed, there were more pulses. Strange phenomena began to appear across the planet, as if the Earth itself was reacting to the challenge. The skies darkened in some places, while in others the sun seemed to burn brighter. There were reports of strange distortions in the atmosphere, energy surges in the oceans, and electromagnetic disturbances in space. It was clear that the test was no longer a passive event. It was active, and humanity was now part of it. Dr. Ray's team worked around the clock trying to find patterns in the chaos, but nothing was clear, nothing made sense. Every new discovery raised more questions than answers. The defenders had begun their test, but they had given no instructions, no guidelines to follow. They had left humanity to figure out what the next move would be, and as the clock ticked down, there was no telling what the defenders expected, what they wanted, or how they would measure success. Dr. Ray could feel the pressure building. The fate of the world now lay in the hands of those who could decode the trial and find a way to succeed. But deep down, she knew that the real challenge wasn't just understanding the test, it was surviving it. As the final days of the trial approached, the tension that had gripped the world only intensified. The pulses from the defenders had become more frequent, their effects growing stronger with each passing hour. Strange phenomena continued to occur across the globe. The energy waves fluctuated in patterns that no one could predict, and the skies were now split by bizarre electrical storms that seemed to defy all natural explanation. Dr. Ray and her team continued to work tirelessly trying to make sense of the trial, but despite their best efforts, they were still no closer to understanding the purpose of the test. The defenders remained silent, watching from afar, giving nothing away. But the mounting pressure was undeniable. The world was waiting for a sign, a hint of what to do next. But it seemed as though the universe itself was holding its breath as humanity teetered on the edge of something unknown. The military had mobilized their forces across key locations, ready for any eventuality, but even they had no clear idea of what to expect. Some feared an invasion, others speculated that the defenders were testing their ability to adapt to the chaos. Whatever the truth was, the world could feel the weight of the test pressing down on them like a physical force, and the question of whether humanity could survive the trial hung in the air like a dark cloud. Dr. Ray sat in the lab staring at the data before her. The readings were unlike anything she had ever seen. The energy signatures from the pulses were growing exponentially stronger, And now there was a shift in the pattern, a new frequency emerging within the signal, a key to the puzzle perhaps, or a final twist in the trial. She felt a sudden sense of clarity, and with it a realization that everything they had been doing until now had been part of the test. The defenders were not trying to destroy them. They were testing humanity's ability to survive change, to adapt to something beyond their control. In that moment, Dare knew what had to be done. The defenders were looking for something far more than raw strength or intelligence. They were testing humanity's capacity for unity, their willingness to come together in the face of an unimaginable challenge. The trial was not one of individual ability but collective will. She immediately reached out to the global leaders and called for an emergency summit. Humanity could not afford to wait any longer. They had to act as one united front. She made her case to the leaders of the world, explaining her theory about the defenders' true test, that if humanity could find common ground and stand together, then they might just have a chance at passing the trial. The world leaders listened carefully, and for the first time in weeks, a sense of shared purpose began to take root among them. The summit was held in the midst of the escalating energy surges and strange phenomena, but instead of bickering and division, the representatives of the world came together in a rare moment of solidarity. They agreed on a course of action to pool resources and knowledge to face the defenders' trial as one unified planet. They knew that they had only one chance to succeed, and if they failed, it could mean the end of their place in the universe. And then the final pulse came. A wave of energy stronger than anything that had come before. It bathed the world in light, and the moment stretched out in suspended time. Dagare stood among the leaders. As the world held its breath, the final test had begun, but this time they were ready, and together they would face whatever came next.